All right. Good evening, everyone. Today, we'll be looking at the LEMP stack. I think the previous video I talked about how to implement the LAMP stack on AWS EC2 instances. And today, I'll be taking us through how to implement the LEMP stack um, with respect to AWS EC2. The LAMP stack and the LEMP stack are kind of different, and we'll be going through my documentation for this implementation using what I was able to document while learning this stack on GitHub. Like I said, the LEMP stack and the LAMP stack are quite similar. The only difference is the underlying web server. In the LAMP stack, in my previous video, we used the Apache for the web server. But for the LEMP stack, we will be actually leveraging on the Nginx web server as opposed to the LAMP stack. As if you can see on my screen, I decided to start from the AWS console so that we will know how to navigate to the EC2 instance and uh, launch how to launch an instance. By default, you can either use the service menu, as you can see here. Given the fact that I've recently, used the EC2, I will see it. But for you, you might probably not see that. So what you can do more of a search. EC2, EC2, which is this. Then you can click on this to go to the EC2 console, apart from the general console. And when you get here, you see launch an instance. So when you click on this to launch an instance, you have a bunch of questions. So once again, I have an instance running based on uh, my last testing on how to launch this. So let me stop this, and so that we start from scratch. See, that's 1 minute. Okay. So let's go back to the EC2 dashboard, which is where we started from. Click on the launch instance. So I'm going to call this sample server. Let's just call it 2. I call it backup. Right? You can name it anything. You can choose to add tags. You can add tags. Whatever you can add tags here. Um, Depends on what you want to call it anyway. So if the EC2, let's assume, I have a specific uh, name or tag I want to give it to make it easier for me to reference. More of the reason why you add tags to your resources in AWS basically is to make it easier for you to check in terms of traceability of resources usage, especially when you're looking through your billing to know what resources is costing what and stuff like that. Anyway, so we'll not be going into that because this lecture is not really to make you an AWS expert. Our focus is how to set up a LEMP stack. So let us go into that. For the underlying OS, I'm picking the Ubuntu, which is similar to what I used in my last video, and I'm sticking with the free trial so that I will not be incurring costs in terms of my resources usage. Then for the instant type, I'm still going with the T2 micro, the free trial. And to make it simpler, I'm sticking with current my current what do you call it, keeper. But you can always create one if you want. You give it a name. I usually stick with the RSA type. Then I stick with the .pen type. Then I create. And the reason why I do this is because I'm using my Mac terminal. I don't have, I'm not using PuTTY. In case you are using PuTTY, you might probably want to go with it. But since I'm not using PuTTY, I'm just going with the Mac native terminal. So that's the configuration I stick with. So for me, since I already have done this, I'll just stick with it. In terms of a security group actually is in charge of what controls traffic in and out of your resources. I'll be sticking with my existing, although by default, when you want to create an instance, they want to automatically create a security group for you by default. But for me, um, I like to stick with my default for now. Um, and interestingly, I did some interesting setup with that. I'm going to explain as we progress in the video. I think that's all the settings you need for now. Then you can click on launch. Give it some minutes. It's successfully launched. Then you can open it up. Yeah, just give it a minute. Right. As you can see, this is it. So if I click on this, I'll be able to see it's still kind of setting up. But while waiting for that, I want to quickly show us something. Right. So if you go to this security, you see the security group I used, and if you click on it, uh, what control traffic into your instance is what we call the inbound rule, and you use this rule to enable which of the ports is accessible on your instance. And for me, I've set up a couple of ports. I set up the port 20, TCP22, which is actually in charge of controlling the SSH, which give me remote access into the instance from my personal computer. And to do this, I kind of allowed this using. I did not give access to everybody. I only give access to my um, personal IP address, which is my current internet service provider IP address that I'm using. Then I also open the port 80, which is for the HTTP, and that is open to everybody. And the reason why this is, if you are creating a website, which is responsible for your website visitation, if you are creating a website, you want to make sure that the website is open to the general public. So this port is responsible for the HTTP, not the HTTPS, since I don't have the SSL enabled or installed on this instance. So I'm only using the HTTP and on port 80. Then I kind of allow all traffic to allow all traffic from the security group from internal. I think this is being used by the AWS services to be able to communicate with my instance. So this part is set up by default when the security group was created by AWS, which is the default security group. So I did not mess up with this setting, so I only added this EC2. So based on this, you should be able to, connect to your instance. Let's go back to our instance. Our instance should be ready by now. You can access your instance by clicking on this. Okay, let's see. Yes, so my instance is running. So it's selected. You select and you click on connect. You come to the SSH client, and so by default, when you create your key pair, you'll be asked to download and keep it safely because you need that to be able to um, connect to your remote server. So for me, basically, what I have done, I've downloaded that. As you can see here, I downloaded it and keep it into a folder called DevOps Training. And ideally, you're supposed to run the command change modify permission, which is chmod, then give it a 400 permission for the set file. Although I've done this already, and what the permission is basically saying is that the current user logged in into the current user of this system, which is my local machine, should have the ability to read the content of this of the key pair, right? And if to know that, if you do ls, you can see the permission. The R means read. You can see that there's no any other permission. The only permission there is to the user. The group permission is none. There's no permission for the group. There's no permission for everybody. The only permission is for the current user to be able to read. And the reason why that is quite important is if you go back to, let me make this a bit smaller. If you go back to this, you will discover that I have an SSH command that is looking into this file, right? And it's going to use the content of this file to authenticate my access into the remote server, basically. And I don't want so what the content of that file is what we call a private key, right? And I don't want anybody having access to the content. So that's why I do a read-only permission into that, right? So with that in place, once you have run that command, what's left for you to do is basically, hold on, let me clear my screen. One minute. Okay, so let me stay here and open a new terminal. Okay. I don't know why this terminal keep coming into this. I want it to be visible. I wanted it to be visible on my browser. Anyway, so let's go back to the terminal. Right, so I go into the folder where I have the key pair, then I can paste the command here to get access into the remote. Oh, sorry, you always want me to spell this fully. To get access into the here, so I am in the instance, and the first thing, if you look into my browser, my instruction, you'll see that the first thing we want to do is for us to install the Nginx, what do you call it, the Nginx web server. And to do that, we start by updating our package manager updates, right? So give it a minute. Right, so that has been done. Then we'll go ahead to install apt install Nginx to install the web server. Good, that has been done. To confirm that everything went well, we'll do sudo systemctl status Nginx. Right, you can see that the web server is enabled and is actively running, which shows that everything is fine. To be able to double check that everything is also fine from the browser end, um, as you can see here, you go back to your instance, right? So you are looking for the public IP, which is this. So if I go to my browser and I do this, port 80, you can either put the port 80 or not anyway. Hold on. Let me write it in full. HTTP this. Let me just write this in full. By default, my browser will want to do HTTPS. Since we don't have an HTTPS port open, so it will actually give an error. So since I've changed it to normal HTTP, see everything is working fine. This is the default page for the Nginx web server. So based on this, shows that our Nginx server is working perfectly. So the next thing we want to do is to install the MySQL server, MySQL database, or the MySQL engine, as the case may be. And to do that is basically doing sudo apt MySQL, sorry about that, MySQL server, which we installed. Why is my MySQL? That should be the sorry, I made a mistake. Should be sudo apt install MySQL server. The more you use most of this command, it become the more it become a second nature. So it's currently installing, as you can see on the screen. So the LEMP is actually Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. So far, we have the Linux, which is the underlying OS, set up on the AWS EC2 console. We have installed the Nginx based on the previous step, and we are currently installing the LEMP part of the main stack. To be sure that everything is working fine or the MySQL has been installed properly, what we will need to do is to check the MySQL command to know if everything is working fine. And you can see we are in the MySQL console. The next step is to add a password, give the root user a password, and we'll do that by writing a what they call SQL query to alter the root user has. The way we set up our root user, set up the root user in such a way that if you are not really so what we are saying is that we want to enter the root user at local machine. The root user, the local machine, the local host is actually indicating that this particular user cannot be accessed remotely. You have to be on the same machine which the MySQL is being installed for you to be able to access or run a command using the root user. And this is being set up based on security, what they call it, based on security measure. It's always advisable to ensure that your root user can only be accessed using a local host. If I change this to this, what I'm basically saying that anywhere you can actually access the root user from any machine remotely, but for security concern, you don't want people getting access to your root user from anywhere. So we'll do that. Then we say identify identified with MySQL underscore native underscore password. What this is actually about is saying that, we want to use the MySQL native password, which is the hashing engine for MySQL, which is one of the old hashing method. So what we want to say is that we want to create this password by using this engine. And the reason why we are doing this is to ensure compatibility with older system. I think the current hashing engine or hashing plugin is still not having a widespread acceptance. So with this command, I think everything is working fine, and I can exit. Then let's test if everything works fine. So I will do sudo MySQL, just do p, which by default we assume is the root. Then we'll do the password.1, and everything works fine. So since that has been taken care of, the next thing we want to move on to is to run the post installation script for MySQL, which is sudo MySQL secure underscore installation. So we ask for the .1. I think I make a mistake. Let me try that again. Okay, good. So it's working fine. So it's asking, just follow the prompt basically. So it's asking, blah 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 blah. I say yes, basically. I used to most of the time to give the strongest. My password is good, so I don't need to change it. At that point, you feel like you want to change your root password, you can do that. And I'll just go with yes, 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 yes. So everything is done. So based on that, I think we are done with the MySQL. As you can see, set up everything. But to be sure that everything is working fine, we want to create a test database, which we are going to do by doing sudo MySQL. Let's just go with, there's no need of me specifying the user. Let me just say we only have one user. So I go with this password, right? So I'll create database called test db. Let's see, no, I have to do this. I think this is the right one. Yes. So I've created the test db, as you can see from what you have here. Then It's always very advisable that when you create a database, you should create the database admin user. And to do that, we are still going to um, make use of the previous command we used to alter the root user. So here we are going to do, instead of alter, we are going to do create user. What user are we trying to create? We want to create a test user. Can give you whatever name you like. Then you can either say, okay, this user, I want the user to be accessed remotely, but for me, for my case, I want to make it local. You can either decide, if you ask yourself, the system, the database I'm trying to create that is probably going to power an application, a web, or whatever, you want to ask yourself, with the database be accessed remotely? The reason why you probably want to use this, if I'm probably using the AWS database service, like maybe Redis, MySQL services, I'll probably want to create my users using the percentage, which means that because they are external database to each of my instances. For my instance to be able to access them, I'm going to use that. But since my database is going to be accessible locally and being run on the same instance, so there's no point in me using that. So I just stick with what I have here. The identified, sorry, I think identified with MySQL. Right. If you look at my documentation, you discover that I did not really specify the hashing engine. So what I'm just assuming here is using whatever default hashing engine has been specified by MySQL. But in my, I think it's always very advisable to to state it explicitly what hashing engine you want to use by then set a password. Well, for simplicity's sake, I stick with the same password as the root, but it's not really advisable in a real life scenario. So by doing this has been set, then I will have to give this the what do you call it, grant it the admin privileges. As you can see, let me just copy this. So by granting all privileges, what I'm saying, I'm elevating the user to the admin for this particular database, right? For this particular database. So I've created this user and I'm giving this user the admin right on the text database that we created initially. So by doing that, I've done that. Next part is flush. The flush command actually helps since we are changing permission. By granting this, what we are saying, we are giving permission to that user. We want the permission to take effect immediately without us needing to restart the MySQL server. So this is the reason why we are doing this, that we exit, right? We can go a bit, so we can in further down, we'll start testing if the database we created is working fine and everything. So the next part is which is the last part, is for us to install the last component of the LEMP stack, which is the PHP. If you probably watched my previous video, you will discover that the approach we are taking here to install the PHP is quite different from the approach we take when we are installing PHP on the Apache web server. You will discover that instead of us installing PHP, we are actually installing PHP fast CGI process manager. The last part of it, which is the PHP MySQL, which is the engine power the connection between PHP and MySQL, see the same. The only difference is that we are now installing this, which is the PHP fast here process manager, which helps to handle the PHP processing. The reason being that in Apache have what they call a PHP Apache web server have an integrated PHP interpreter, which means the web server can interpret the PHP code by itself without needing any extra uh, what do you call it, any extra external interpreter. And if you look at you go through the video, we installed PHP separately, then we installed the Apache PHP library, which help in interacting, which help the interaction between the Apache server and PHP. And I believe that is the embedded PHP interpreter for the Apache. But in the case of Nginx does not have that embedded interpreter. So it has an external interpreter, which is the PHP fast GCI process manager, which actually helps to to process the PHP side of the application. And based on this, it gives a bit of an edge to NGX in terms of performance and the likes, but it comes with the extra overhead of extra configuration and the likes. And so for us to do this, let me just go back to my terminal. So I can do my sudo apt php fmp sorry p this, yes. Then I can do this MySQL. Sorry, I think I made something here, which is the install command. Install. Yep, I think yes, this should do the trick. Right, so let's go back to documentation. Once that has been installed properly, we can test if everything is working by creating a simple PHP file on our server, right? On our just create a simple PHP. So I can just do this, paste this. This will open the console, so I can write a simple PHP code. What I'm actually saying is to say PHP info, a simple code that just give us the general information about underlying PHP. Then I save. Then if you go to your browser, I think I still have my browser open. I just do /info.php. Well, let's see, something is wrong. Let's see. Let me see. CD. See, okay, so the reason why this is not working is that this info needs to be inside the HTML folder. So I can move that. I move that to, I can move my info into HTML, whatever. So, yep. So that should work now. So if I do this, it's trying to download this. If for real, something is definitely not right. Something is definitely broken. Okay, let's troubleshoot that. That is highly unexpected. Okay. Middle past index. I want to see the content, which is the yes, which is the default. Right. Then let me remove this. Remove info. Sudo. Okay. Sudo. Okay, so let me do it again. Nano info.php. First echo. Cool. Hello world. That should close this up. Yes. Let me reload my web server by doing systemctl reload Nginx. Let's try that again. That's weird. Let me try to do. All right. I figured out the issue. So by default, when you install your Nginx, your Nginx is not what I call it. Is not configured to handle PHP code by default. See. TC. PHP. Yeah. So let's go into our PHP folder. Just the reason why I wanted to show you the version of PHP install, which is 0.8.0. Now, if you do Nginx, right, and we go to cd site available, you see some default configuration there. So if I do cast defaults, right, you can see that here the PHP, the ng responsible for PHP is commented out, which means that for now our Nginx is not configured to recognize PHP, and that's the reason why my PHP code is not being recognized. I will deal with that in subsequent what I call it. Let me clear the screen. See, right. So let me just go to right. HTML. Right, so let me move my code. Let me move my sudo move my info code to the www. Yes, so I can go it higher. Right, so let's leave my code there for now. All right, so all right. So let me leave my code for there for now. So we'll probably just keep this because I don't want to touch the default configuration. I don't want to touch the default configuration. This. I don't want to touch my default configuration for now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip this and I'm going to create a new configuration for a new server, for a new website. Let me clear. So what we are going to do is to do sudo, let's make a new root directory for a web server, for a website called projects LEMP, right? And what we are going to do is basically we're going to set the owner of this to be, let's use the recursive flag, user column user, right? Then we do var w projects. So we are doing that basically. So what I'm going to do is sudo move the info into the projects folder basically, right? Now we need to set the configuration for this particular website that we just created. So to do that, I'm going to do cd into the Nginx sites available, right? So here I'm going to do sudo nano. So I'm going to create a configuration file called project, right? That's my configuration file, and I'm going to open that. In my configuration file, I'm going to copy in this and I'm going to explain it in a bit. Paste this here. So what we are saying is that the server should listen to the port 80. As you know, the server name is project LEMP or whatever. This one actually represents a messed up my configuration file. Alright, so since we don't have a domain name, it's not really necessary for me to set the server name for now. So what I can do is to set an underscore. Setting an underscore means that I don't have a domain. If I have a domain name, maybe www.bolu.com or whatever, jumia.com, that's where you're going to post that. But since I don't have any, so I leave that as that. Yeah, what you are trying to tell, you are telling your server that it should check for the file or folder being requested based on what was typed on the browser URL, and if it doesn't found, is not found, it should return the 404 error. And the second location block is telling the browser what PHP processing or package interpreter it should use. Like I said, Nginx by default cannot handle PHP code. And if you look at what happened when I was trying to play around the info, instead of processing and displaying, is trying to the browser cannot, the server does not understand, so it's trying to download the file instead of displaying the content of the file. So based on this, so by including this or in my configuration, I'll be able to tell the web server how to process the PHP code. So let's save this, right? And I think that's it. Then I'm going to activate this, by coupling this. So go back to my terminal. I'm going to activate this. I made a very interesting mistake while I was testing this out. I was thinking that since I was already inside the site hyphen available, right, there's no need for me to type the full part of the project LEMP file, right? I can just run this command, remove this entire part of the code, just include this and everything should be fine. But I was dead wrong, right? What happened is I created a circular reference which led to an error. So the right code is irrespective of if you are within 1 minute. Right, sorry about that. A bit of Madam was calling, so we needed to answer. All right, so as I was saying, um, the right code is to write the full part of the configuration file, right? What this code does is it's going to create a symbolic link inside the site enabled, right? Referencing this particular configuration file, which the Nginx is going to use, when running. So press enter. Then you want to test if everything is okay with our configuration file by using this command, which is a bit different from what we use when we are testing out the Apache. So if everything is fine, you are going to get yes. You can see syntax okay, configuration text successful, which shows that everything is working fine for the server. So we need to disable the default configuration so that Apache can use our new configuration to run the server. Then we need to reload our Apache server by using systemctl reload Nginx. Sorry, that's not Apache, Nginx server. And everything should work like a charm, right? Now, the interesting thing is, let me go back. Now, if I go back and I do this should work now, right? You can see hello world is now working because now I've been able to tell Apache where to find the PHP interpreter. So let's go back to our, let me just do sudo nano var www project info, right? So let me change this to the PHP info function, right? So I can do this, yes, this. Then if I reload this, you can see this, right? You can see all of this. By default, you just should tell that your PHP is fully integrated with your web browser. At the end of the day, you are expected to delete this because of security issue per se. So I can do remove var www project info and remove this, right? Sorry. Now we have been able to test that. If I reload this page, you get a 404 error, which tells you that the file we are looking for it does not exist. So what we are going to do, we are going to do a bit of, let me create an index file. Let me just create a simple index file. Let's create a simple index file running this. So what this is going to do is basically just going to set this parameter, right, which is going to set public IP to, it's going to create that parameter and set it to what my public IP address is, my instant public address. Then I have this echo. This echo basically was supposed to, so this echo command is going to output this text. Now I've actually introduced what we call pipe, right? The pipe command, which what it does is, no, I have, so with this pipe, what I have here is I have two commands, the echo command and the T command. So what the echo command is doing, so what pipe does is that it's going to take the output of this command and use it as an input to this T command. What the T command actually does is that it helps to write into a file, at the same time display whatever the command, whatever the input is on the screen. So the input of the T is actually the output of the echo command. So if I do this, right, I'm creating a parameter like a variable. Then if I go back and I say, if I do this, now you can see that it outputs the what do you call it, um, it outputs the command on the page, right? Right. So let me see. If I go to, if I do cast, www project index, now I should have an index file, and this is what was imputed into my index file, although that's not what I was actually expecting anyway. The code was supposed to, this particular code was supposed to give me my IP, my public IP, but like it's kind of blocking me from doing that anyway. So what I can do is, let's just go manually, let me see. Okay, so sudo nano yes, I'm getting old. Project index. So I want to open this. Well, interestingly, it was supposed to give me, so the command, AWS is not giving me what I needed. So it's is kind of concatenating the results from the public code and imputing it on the screen, concatenating it with the hello line from blah 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 blah. So let me just remove that and just Well, I can just paste it myself. I don't think. Save. Uh, in the next video, we'll probably find a better way of doing that. Anyway, so based on what I've done, if I go back to my page, let's go back to the home page. Right, so it shows that my current site is working perfectly. So now let's move to the next stage where we want to start testing that our database connection with our page, with our PHP and everything, like putting everything together. So to do that, I need to log in into the database. So I'm going to do sudo, let me just go sudo MySQL. I want to log in as the test user, which is the admin to this particular database. Password, so password should be this, right? So I'm going to tell system clear, I think that's the code here. So I'm going to tell that I want to use the test db, so what I'm saying is that I want to use this particular db, so the command I'm going to be writing will be in respect to that db. So I want to create a table inside the database, and that's so what I'm writing. These are just SQL queries. So I've created a table. Then let me insert data. Let me just copy all of them. I want to insert 3 data into my table. Right. So you can choose to see the data if you do show table, right? Show table to do. I think that's the query. Not sure. I'm not sure. Let me see. Blah 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 blah. Let me see if I get this right. Well, I think my SQL is still a bit rusty. Let me check my notes. I think I make some notes. Let me see. Oh, I know. So let me just do system clear. So I'm supposed to write a select query, select all data from the to-do list table. Right, so yes. Oh, my SQL is still rusty. So this shows that everything is working fine, so I can just exit. Right, so let's move on to, so let's create a file. Let's create a file inside our website folder or root folder. Then inside the file, we are going to copy this entire code. I'm going to explain the code in just a minute. Now, so what we are creating is a PHP code. We create a variable called user, which is similar to the database user, admin user. Then we included the password. We create a variable for the database name. Then we create a variable for the to-do list table. Now, this is what we call a try catch block in programming, basically. So what we are saying is that try this block of code. If you encounter any error, catch the error in this block of code. In the first line, what we are trying to do, we declare a variable called db, and this particular line of code, we are using it to connect to the database. We are using that to communicate. The PHP is communicating with the database using the PHP data object API to communicate with the MySQL database. That's why you can see there are two ways you can communicate with your database. You can either use the PDO API, or we can use the MySQL or what we call the MySQL Improve API. The MySQL Improve API is a dedicated API used to connect with MySQL database, but the PDO can be used to connect to as many databases as possible, and that's the reason why in the code here we actually indicated the database we are trying to connect with the database engine, and that's why if I'm probably connecting to a Postgres, this would have been Progress. Because I'm connecting to MySQL, that's the reason why we have the MySQL here. I think I've been talking for a while without showing my face, and that will not be nice, right? So let's kind of show the face, right? So, all right, sorry for that. I think I did not know my camera was not on. All right, so let me just go back to let me go back to this. The next line of action is just to create a simple HTML code, which is the header, then create another list. Then we created a variable called to do, which is more like an array from extracting all the contents from the table, database table. Then we are running a for loop. We are running a for loop on that array, and on each of the row we want to spit out what the content is, right? Then we close the another list, and if there's any error, like I said, it will catch the error by spitting out what the error message is, and this this die function will kill the PHP process, and the like, just stop the entire execution at that point if there's an error. So we save, right? Right. And once we have done that, what we just need to do is to go to this page, right? Just the way we did for the info. So I'm just going to do /this and run. If everything works fine, right? So this brings us to the end of this. As you can see, everything works fine. Our PHP is communicating fine with our database, and our browser can process the PHP code and display on the site. Thank you very much for taking time to go through my lecture. Is a bit lengthy. I'll try as much as possible to make it shorter in subsequent lecture. If you are interested in, you can check my previous video, and if you are interested in a text format, there's a blog. You can see the link below the video, where you can just go through, and you can also see my GitHub link also below the video description, where you can also check through the instruction and follow along. Thank you very much, and catch you some other time.